You guys, I can't believe that we're almost there. Hopefully we're not there yet because I still have to make the 50,000 subs video after this one. Also, it took a community guidelines warning, but now I finally know where the line is. I can show not certain things in my videos, I can show certain things. Not that thing that I showed. You gotta look on the positive side though. Now, at least, I know for sure. So I've done 2 goofy videos, and naturally, we have to balance it out with something a little more serious. Something a little more, richer. Like a lot of you, I grew up with some pretty F-tier, not skibbity sex education. YouTube, I swear, my videos are not made for kids. That was a joke. It's post-brain rot, okay? Trust me. Anyways, we've done a lot of videos on what sex education should be, but in order to truly master this concept, one must study all its aspects. So today, we're taking a very broad look at abstinence-only sex education, its praises and its pitfalls. I want to keep this video largely unbiased until the very end, when I give you my personal opinion on the matter. So let's absolutely jump right into this topic. Adolescence is a period of transition, growth, and exploration. During this life phase, adolescents undergo physical, psychological, and sexual maturation and tend to develop an increased interest in sex and relationships, with positive relationships becoming strongly linked to sexual and reproductive health as well as overall well-being. Couldn't be my perfect little angel. Well, parents, I hate to break it to you, but by the end of high school, the majority of teenagers will have had sex. Approximately 57%. Naturally, this leads to a lot of awkward encounters between adults and teens. Get the fuck out of my room, I'm playing Minecraft. Right, you were playing Minecraft. I gotcha. What I'm trying to say is, these awkward encounters have led to parents offloading this responsibility onto the schools. It's your job to teach our kids about sex, not our job. We already covered the South Park episode that showed how this hilariously lackluster system is terrible, but we didn't really talk about what the schools were deciding to teach specifically. Is the sex ed comprehensive? Is it abstinence only? Somewhere in between? Well, the government has established several programs over the last several decades to teach young people about sex. That's right, several programs. This cluster truck of programs results in a current system where these young people are more confused than ever. We'll go over the current state of this system a bit later on in the video, but for now, we need to focus on one side in particular: abstinence only. What is it? Where did it come from? And can it help my kid prepare for the nightmare that is modern dating? The real roots of this conflict can be traced back to the late 80s and 90s. Where HIV and AIDS were running rampant and terrifying the country. Very quickly, 2 narratives emerged. Pro-condom teachings preached the tool's effectiveness in stopping the spread of HIV, and on the other side, anti-condom groups were denigrating its effectiveness. Keep in mind, at this point, HIV and AIDS were believed to be spread through homosexual sex, which is a belief that still hasn't completely gone away. The article that I'm using for research puts it like this. These groups were comparing using a condom to playing Russian roulette and blaming quote-unquote victims of HIV and AIDS for their own complicity in contracting what was then viewed by many as a primarily homosexual disease. At the turn of the millennium, the religious right ascended in power and influence, and with them came a host of these anti-condom groups. According to that same article, although right-wing politics bears most of the responsibility for the push against comprehensive sexuality education, it was actually in 1996, under left-wing President Bill Clinton, that the abstinence-only until marriage industry scored one of its largest victories when, under Title V, Section 510 of the Social Security Act, the federal government started granting $50 million a year to state governments to dole out to sub-grantees to carry out these programs. I did not promote and provide funding to abstinence-only sex education programs. This gave rise to what would be known as abstinence-only sex education. It often excludes other types of sexual and reproductive health education, such as birth control and safe sex practices. Abstinence education is actually pretty clearly defined, which surprised me personally, and it usually follows very specific principles at the federal level. It A. has as its exclusive purpose teaching the social, psychological, and health gains to be realized by abstaining from sexual activity. B. teaches abstinence from sexual activity outside marriage as the expected standard for all school-age children. C. teaches that abstinence from sexual activity is the only certain way to avoid out-of-wedlock pregnancy, sexually transmitted diseases, and other associated health problems. D. teaches that a mutually faithful, monogamous relationship in context of marriage is the expected standard of human sexual activity. E. teaches that sexual activity outside of the context of marriage is likely to have harmful psychological and physical effects. F. teaches that bearing children out of wedlock is likely to have harmful consequences for the child's parents, and society at large. G. teaches young people how to reject sexual advances and how alcohol and drug use increases vulnerability to sexual advances. And H. teaches the importance of attaining self-sufficiency before engaging in sexual activity. The wording of that came from Wikipedia, but I was able to find multiple sources listing the same general principles. Now, I do have to point out that most of that has clear bias, especially the one about monogamous, committed marriage relationships. But the last two, G and H, actually don't really have that much bias. An intoxicated individual can't consent. We've pretty much solidified that. And you shouldn't rely on sex as a kind of dependency drug. Also, pretty standardly true. Proponents of this curriculum argue that all sex before marriage has long-lasting negative effects. It should be made clear that the doctrine states that sex before marriage is bad, and not sex before you're ready, physically, mentally, and emotionally. Very clear distinction there. They teach that sex within a monogamous marriage will give you pleasure, and anything outside of that or before that is only damaging. Well summarized by Wikipedia, abstinence generally places a great emphasis on the importance of the institution of marriage, which some proponents believe allows young people to grow and develop as individuals. But it goes further than just emotional damage for them. Many of these groups also believe that comprehensive sex education, meaning sex ed that teaches you how to use a condom and other protections, is bad because it encourages promiscuity and more sex between young people in general. This was a big deal because at the time, more sex was arguably spreading HIV and AIDS. According to the Guttmacher Institute, the AFLA, or Adolescent Family Life Act, was a 5-year program with costs estimated around $250 million. Many supporters of abstinence-only education do so out of the belief that comprehensive guides to sex or information about contraceptives will ultimately result in teens actively pursuing and engaging in more sexual activities, while others oppose the endorsement of contraception for religious reasons. So some people do it for medical, some people do it for religious. Not every advocate is built the same. But there is a common effect between all of these different subgroups. The common theme here is that these adults do not trust their teenagers to make decisions that override their hormones, because they often see them as less intelligent.
You stupid!
Look, that is debatable. That's a whole other video, but that's what's happening. And as a result, they see a teenager's sexual desire as something to be controlled, something that can be controlled, dividing the teens into two separate categories in the minds of these adults: the innocent and the guilty, the vulnerable and the predatory, the pure and the corrupting. You've seen this with your parents saying, "Oh, there's the good kids and the bad kids." That's what they're doing, treating the children as less intelligent and believing that these teenagers will follow this very rudimentary system. There are a myriad of medical reasons abstinence-only proponents can cite, but as mentioned earlier, there is a religious angle here that cannot be ignored. The Christian right initially stood with school-based sex education programs, and began supporting these abstinence-only groups due to its focus on marriage. As a Christian Catholic myself, I can confidently say that this is the case because marriage, especially Christian marriage, is something the church desperately needs right now. Catholic families mean more children they can baptize, and more members to carry on the church into its uncertain, dwindling future. I can go on personally about 50 rants about the Catholic Church, but I'm not going to do that. I only bring up this point because the church is intertwined with the history of sex education. I do not intend to bash anyone's religion in this video. To the new right, the abstinence-only sex education movement was an opportunity and an avenue to change the current view and status of sexuality in America, aligning it more with their own values and, as a result, creating individuals who remained abstinent until marriage, and thus, citizens who embodied values of self-discipline and morality. So, their reasoning aligned with their beliefs. The effects of these changes can still be seen today when you look at state-by-state sex education. According to the National Conference of State Legislatures, NCSL, as of October 1st, 2020, 30 states and the District of Columbia require public schools to teach sex education, 28 of which mandate both sex education and HIV education. 39 states and the District of Columbia require students to receive instruction about HIV. Only 22 states require that, if provided, sex and/or HIV education must be medically, factually, or technically accurate. State definitions of medically accurate vary from requiring that the Department of Health review curriculum for accuracy to mandating that curriculum be based on information from published authorities upon which medical professionals rely. Look, I'm sorry, but that's really fucking stupid. I don't think it's biased to say that our sex education system is a complete joke when less than half of the states require that any of it be accurate at all. What? I know I said I'd be unbiased in this video, but this one point pisses me off beyond a measure because of how insane it is. Under current guidelines, US states cannot use these government funds to educate adolescents about contraceptive use or discuss contraceptive methods, except to emphasize their failure rates. That's the only point of consistency here. Whether you're pro-abstinence or against it, it's sad to see just how our education ended up in this scattered, lackluster state. I think at this point in the video, it would be helpful if we denoted the 3 types of sex education you're likely to find in any given US state. Abstinence only, abstinence plus, we'll come back to that one, and comprehensive. Abstinence only teaches that abstinence is the expected standard of behavior for teens. It usually excludes any information about the effectiveness of contraception or condoms to prevent unintended pregnancy and STIs. Sometimes must adhere to the 8-point federal definition that we covered earlier. Now, comprehensive provides medically accurate, age-appropriate information about abstinence as an option, as well as safer sex practices including contraception and condoms as effective ways to reduce unintended pregnancy and STIs. Comprehensive programs also usually include information about healthy relationships, communication skills, and human development, among other topics. Now, as for the one that personally interests me the most, Abstinence Plus stresses abstinence, but also includes information on contraceptives and condoms. It's the middle ground between the two extremes. So, abstinence only, pretty self-explanatory. They think no sex before marriage. Comprehensive, on the other hand, accepts the fact that teenagers are going to have sex no matter what, and figures we might as well get them to do it safely and avoiding unwanted pregnancies, especially now that Roe v. Wade was overturned. Abstinence Plus is kind of in the middle, doing a little bit of both. It should be noted that a lot of these abstinence-only programs have actually rebranded themselves to sexual risk avoidance education, which sounds a lot nicer. Since 2019, the federal government has spent $110 million annually on sexual risk avoidance sex education, and that's the modern state of sex education in the United States. So, does this curriculum, actually work or not? Well, evidence does not support the effectiveness of abstinence-only sex education. Plain and simple. It's been found to be completely ineffective in decreasing HIV risk in the developed world.
Whoa! This is worthless.
It does not decrease the rates of unplanned pregnancies or rates of sexual activity when compared to comprehensive sex education. And none of this is my own bias. A lot of these statements are directly pulled from research. Like, I didn't change the wording on a lot of this stuff. It's incredible just how anti-abstinence all of these resources are, because that's how hard these programs failed. The American Academy of Pediatrics has recommended against the use of abstinence only because it has found to be ineffective, and because the media frequently conveys information about non-abstinence. Other research has even found that in the states with mandated abstinence only, there was actually an increase in teen pregnancy rates, mainly in the South, where these programs are more prevalent. There was a decline from 1995 to 2002 in teen pregnancy rates, but this is largely attributed to improved contraception mechanisms. And while sex education in general has been linked to a delay in the first time having sex, abstinence-only programs specifically have not shown this link, and do not seem to influence if or when young people begin having sex. Finally, to round out all of this, a 2010 report by the Guttmacher Institute pointed out that pregnancy rates for teens 15 to 19 reversed their decline in 2006, meaning they went up, near the peak of the abstinence-only program in the United States. So, all of this funnels down to one simple sentence. Abstinence-only sex education was kind of a complete failure. This has caused many parents and educators to speak out against these mandates which are still in place, as this clearly isn't working. And Candles here, stepping in to add my own opinion to this. In my personal opinion, the reason these programs did not, and still do not work, is because they fundamentally misunderstand the psychology of teenagers. They're often rebellious, and they do things because their parents told them not to specifically. The ding-dongs? Of course they're gonna do the opposite of what you tell them to do. Not that every teenager acts that way, but a lot of them do. So not teaching them about how to do it safely isn't going to stop them from doing it. Just like not teaching people about how to handle alcohol isn't gonna get people to stop drinking. It's stupid. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that there is one study that does show a successful delaying of sexual activity from abstinence-only programs. While advocates of comprehensive sex education recognize the study as rigorous and credible, they argue that the programs in these studies are not actually representative of most abstinence-only programs. Instead, the evaluated programs differed from traditional abstinence-only programs in three major ways. 1. They did not discuss the morality of a decision to have sex. 2. They encouraged youth to wait until they were ready to have sex, rather than until marriage. And 3. They did not criticize the use of condoms. Sounds like this was more of a win for abstinence plus education than anything else. So let's circle back to the religious aspect. Some critics of abstinence only argues that this all borders on religious interference in secular education, meaning the mixing of church and everything that's not church. A lot of these are public schools. There's a reason they don't teach religion classes there, because those are the places where people have decided we do not want religion to have an influence. These critics also dispute the claim made by supporters that comprehensive sex education encourages teens to have more premarital sex. Comprehensive sex ed tends to be more progressive in its views, leading to a lot of individuals pointing out the fact that abstinence only is rooted in outdated beliefs of one man, one woman partnerships. Some couples are two men, some are two women, some couples are thruples. And of course, some relationships never lead to marriages at all. An LGBTQ relationship would receive very poor sex education in an abstinence-only state, because it's too focused on heteronormativity. Oftentimes, it's the case that homosexual couples are more at risk for STIs. So it's painfully ironic that they're the ones receiving the poorest of sex education in these regions. Not to mention, stigma and discrimination against LGBTQ students increase their substance use disorder, suicide rates, and events of experiencing violence. The same goes for students who may have unfortunately experienced a form of sexual trauma or abuse in their younger years. The exact numbers are debated, but It's estimated that 1 in 53 boys and 1 in 9 girls have experienced sexual abuse or assault by an adult. These are the ones that are the most left behind by poor sex education. Advocates for Youth lays out the pipeline for us. Abstinence-only sex education distorts information about contraceptives, including only revealing failure rates associated with their use, and ignoring discussion of their benefits. The language surrounding medicine and health is constructed as being both objective and value-free. This objectivity is then adopted by conservative politicians and campaigners to assert authority, which historically holds its basis in religion. They also tout gender stereotypes as scientific fact and reinforce messages about male aggression and female passivity, which makes them a factor contributing to the ongoing gender war. In other words, a problem with abstinence only is that bias often runs deep in these groups. After hearing all this, you may still be a supporter of abstinence only. That's fine. Again, I'm just here to present research. But it wouldn't be right to not cover its alternative, comprehensive sex education. Now, before I do that, I have to say, if I have any bias in this video, that's where it lies, so keep it in mind. Comprehensive sex education is more diversely defined. Most generally, these programs include medically accurate, evidence-based information about both contraception and abstinence, as well as condoms to prevent STI transmission. Some programs, known as Abstinence Plus, stress abstinence as the best way to prevent pregnancy and STIs, but also include information about contraception and condoms. Other programs emphasize safe sex practices and often include information about healthy relationships and lifestyles. And unlike abstinence-only programs, these comprehensive ones seem to work pretty well, at least based on the data we currently have. Another study found that over 40% of programs that addressed both abstinence and contraception delayed the initiation of sex and reduced the number of sexual partners. And more than 60% of the programs reduced the incidence of unprotected sex. Now, 40% and 60% don't sound all that great, but it's better than the 0% we're getting with abstinence only. It should also be pointed out that, in that little blurb there I just did, what a lot of people forget is that comprehensive sex education talks about abstinence as an option. They don't leave it out. Comprehensive does what abstinence does and just takes it a step further, saying abstinence is a choice, or, if you're mature enough, sexual activity is also a choice. So, this is the part of the video where we take a step back, we calm down a little bit, and I tell you my personal experience with sex education. I personally received very, very poor sex ed. Like straight out of turd town, just god-awful. I already mentioned that, yes, I grew up Catholic. Not that that automatically means bad sex education all the time, but it is a usual side effect. All I got was a few basic lectures on STDs, and this left me with a lot of questions, and a lot of shame. My school lacked effective sex education removed from religious bias. Like, I had a few role models growing up who would do the usual Catholic spiel. Even thinking about sex is evil, etc. One of these educators even stressed to me and my entire class that all men just wanted sex and they're always trying to look up your skirt. That is horrible and very destructive to middle school minds. Like, please leave your bias at the door. I don't care what you believe. You can't say that to a room of 12-year-olds, many of which are still in guy-girl friend groups. In my opinion, abstinence-only sex education does not work. And if comprehensive is too much for you, please consider Abstinence Plus. Or, better yet, grow some balls and talk to your kids about it. Don't leave it up to the school. You know, I myself believe that you should wait a while before you have sex. Not necessarily until marriage, but until your bits are done growing, which is usually around the age of 21, or even later for some people. Wait until you're ready, physically, mentally, and emotionally. Don't be pressured into it, but at the same time, take the time to educate yourself on the ins and outs of safe, healthy sex. You know, that's why this channel exists. I'm fired up right now because I'm passionate. I see my channel as a possible alternative to inherently boring STD sex education. Look, if you're a parent and you don't want to teach your kids about sex, I design a lot of my videos to be educational, but also entertaining. I'm not trying to make this a plug for myself, I swear, but I really do think that a lot of my videos, and the ones I'm going to make in the future, are going to address topics that these educators wouldn't dare touch, but topics that are fundamental in sex in 2024, like porn addiction, Rule 34 specifically, big ducks and small ducks, and why that shouldn't really matter as much. And on that point, anyone outside the US, please let me know in the comments what is the situation across the pond, because I'd love to hear about it and I might make videos on it in the future. I really do want to create a channel that provides well-researched, factually and medically accurate sex education, but in a way that's entertaining and not stuffy and talking down to you. I want to help you. So this video was a little serious and a little awkward towards the end, if I gotta say, than my usual output. Was this spurred on by a community guidelines warning? Did I push out a more serious video because one of my goofy ones got taken down? Possibly. It's kind of hard to tell my exact motivations when it comes to making these videos. I just do whatever feels right in the moment. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed today's slightly more serious video. We're gonna get back to goofy stuff next week, and alongside that, I've got some big plans in the works. I'm looking into starting possibly a Patreon or a Ko-Fi, Coffee, I don't know how you say it, whatever, where I might post like non-sex ed related content, just for the people who maybe are willing to donate a little bit or maybe want something other than sex ed content. So, thank you again for 40,000 subscribers, actually 41 by the time of recording this. You can see why I'm trying to get that 50k video out as soon as possible. And thank you for the gratuitous amounts of fan art. You guys are awesome. I'm sorry I can't include every piece of it in every video because that would be way too much, but you guys have been amazing with your support, so thank you all so much. I will see you all in the next video. I love you all. Good night.